Whoa, Doors is getting new Rush variants. You heard me right, Rush and Ambush won't be the only main floor entities which function the way they do, where they rush into a room causing you to hide in a locker. But based on this message from the developers themselves, they are considering adding more entities that function like them. Now, although we weren't given a clear explanation for what these new official Rush variant entities would look like, I have gone through the liberty of creating 3 of my own, which I'll be showcasing and explaining to you in this video. So, right now, you'll be seeing my concepts for what I think the upcoming Rush variations could look and function like in-game. Keep in mind the design of most of these entities are placeholders as of now, except one which I'll get into a little later. So, with all of that being said, let's begin. Alright, so the first Rush variant I created is one I call Snot. Now, you may be thinking, Cheddar, why did you name it after a booger? Well, because it looks like a booger, simple as that. Snot here physically appears to be a green-colored Rush, with a more deformed face and a longer row of front teeth. They are not a pretty green color though, like Blitz, but instead an ugly sewer green, which is why they look like a booger. In terms of spawning behavior, Snot would be somewhat rarer than Rush, yet still potentially encountered multiple times throughout a playthrough. I imagine that in Floor 1 they would spawn solely on their own, yet in Floor 2 they would actually have the chance to spawn alongside Rush, as their mechanic could be used jointly with that of Rush's to make quite an challenging encounter. So, now that we have first impressions out of the way, how would Snot function? Well, much like a fart, Snot here is silent but deadly. They make almost no noise besides maybe a very low humming sound, but their presence would be notified by an extremely violent shake of your screen. They would also be incredibly fast, catching up to players almost instantly after their screen shake visual cue occurs. Now, this incredibly difficult detection method is balanced out by what happens if Snot does manage to hit you, as well as how they are avoided. Unlike the other Rush variants, being attacked by Snot doesn't actually kill you, but instead it would result in you losing a bit of health, being flung, and being temporarily blinded. All of these effects serve as a way of confusing the player, as although Snot is a nuisance at most when encountered alone, they can be the deciding factor between life and death if they occur alongside or right before Rush comes, which, as I had said, could happen periodically in the mines. Now, as for avoiding Snot, all you'd have to do is crouch and stay crouched before they hit you. You don't even need to hide in a locker, and that means that if your reaction time is quick enough from when you can see your screen shake to before Snot actually attacks, you can survive pretty easily. Moving on though, the next Rush variant concept I'd like to discuss isn't exactly a Rush variant, but at the same time it kind of is. It's a bit confusing, but just stick with me here. Essentially, this creature, which is inspired by Trevor Henderson's Smile Room monster, is what I like to call the Decoy, a fleshy mouth built into a mine's locker, featuring multiple sets of teeth as well as long tendrils extruding from each surface. This entity concept is also the one whose design isn't a placeholder, as I actually modeled it and didn't just edit an image of Blitz. Anyways, much like most locker monsters in Doors-inspired games, getting into the Decoy's locker would result in the entity eating and killing you. But surprisingly, it also functions like a Rush variant, which is why I'm putting it in this video. Here is how it works. You see, the Decoy would only be able to spawn in mine's lockers, yet going up to these lockers or just looking at them prior to opening them wouldn't actually reveal anything. The Decoy is completely invisible through normal means, and the way it's detected is actually through a very special audio cue. Essentially, whenever a Decoy spawns, every locker in the room will contain one of these Decoy mouth monsters, so technically multiple will spawn at the same time. And given how they are mouths, they should theoretically have a voice. So when the entities spawn, they would actually mimic the audio cue of Rush with their voice, even though Rush wouldn't actually be present, and this would trick players into opening the locker attempting to hide, which, as I said, is impossible to detect, contains a decoy mouth just by looking at it, and by doing this, the entity will be able to eat and kill the player. The reason why I'm putting this concept in this video about Rush variants is because it tricks the player into thinking Rush is actually coming by playing the entity's audio cue. So if they would open the locker or get eaten, of course, the audio cue itself wouldn't be an exact replica of Rush's screaming noise, but instead it would have a slight tone difference, so experienced players can detect whether Rush is actually coming or if a decoy locker is mimicking the noise as a trap. Lastly though, the final Rush variant I have created is what I call Armageddon. This entity appears to be a red-colored Rush with glowing malformed eyes, as well as a missing set of lower teeth. Armageddon, as its name suggests, is definitely one of the more violent and brutal entities on this list, and that is reflected in how it functions. Much like normal Rush, when Armageddon spawns, the lights would flicker and the ground would shake if they appear in the mines. Yet, unlike Rush, who has a relatively mild scream, Armageddon will release a blood-curdling howl as they pass through the rooms. Additionally, much like Haste, they would actually have the ability to be seen through walls, as that way their proposed functionality would perform better. Now, unlike the other Rush variants in the game, this entity isn't countered by hiding. In fact, hiding from them is actually a one-way ticket to your demise. If you get into a locker, they'll just open it and kill you. And much like how A120 or Haste functions, they'll actually follow your player character, meaning you can't hide in rooms previously thought to be safe. So, if you can't hide from Armageddon, how do you counter them? Well, the answer to that question is by fighting back. This entity, although intimidating, can be fought back against with enough resistance, yet actually providing that resistance can prove to be a difficult challenge. Utilizing their A120-like following behavior, the way players would avoid Armageddon is by standing their ground. Let me paint the picture for you. You are standing in a room and suddenly behind you the entity appears barreling towards you. In order to avoid them, you must look at them dead on, resulting in them teleporting to a new location and attacking from there. This kind of thing is like a buffed version of Screech, although after looking at the entity one time, instead of leaving, they would just move to a different position and attack from there. With each new position Armageddon takes, they'll become even more stronger and aggressive, until they become so fast and violent that they either kill you, or you successfully look at them some amount of times to warrant their departure. I'm not entirely sure what that amount of times is, but just a lot of times. So, to summarize, the Doors developers confirm that they are at least considering adding Rush variants to the game. And although they haven't provided any further information as to what these variants may be, besides something I'll mention probably in a later video, I have gone through the effort of making 3 concepts of my own, those being Snot, Decoy, and Armageddon. Of course, if Rush variations were ever to come, they likely wouldn't function like the concept shown in this video. But I just wanted to showcase these ideas I had, as I've always loved the possibility for Doors to have more Rush variants to spice up the normal gameplay. So, with all of that being said, let me know in the comments which concepts you like the most, and thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.